Legacy Reborn podcast. A man and a woman who have failed miserably, but took a second and third chance at love and life and decided to share their stories of being reborn.
Hey guys, thanks for joining in at the Legacy Reborn podcast. Today's a special episode. We have Krystal Cantu. She's not in studio today. Unfortunately, she's in Florida, so we have her in via Skype. This person is an amazing person. She is a Paralympic athlete. She's a coach. She's a mother, and she's also a native Texan. She's going to bring a lot of value to us today, and let's just have a great conversation with her. Krystal, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Just clarification, I
Sure.
am not a Paralympic athlete, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay,
Awesome.
we'll touch on that then. All right, so how's your day going? How's everything going for you over in Florida today?
It's good. It's a normal, hot, humid day in South Florida.
It sounds like Texas, except for today, it's decided to just pour on us.
It sure did. You know, I do have a little one. I have an 8-year-old, and I tell him, I said, honey, I love the mundane. I love the boring days that are just, that's life. That's what life is all about, is that we're just living and breathing and getting on with our days. And, when we get to have those regular, normal, mundane days, for me, those are my favorite, because we're just living life, and it's just passing by so quickly in front of us, especially with little ones. They grow up so fast.
That's
Yeah,
right.
they
That's
do.
right. So let's jump right into it. Krystal, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit, let's start in high school. How was high school for you?
High school was good, I guess. I mean, it wasn't bad. I did good in school. I stayed preoccupied with sports. I was in tennis. I was in softball. I was in a pretty much like an elective class that was called Estudiantina, where you learn to either play the guitar, the mandolin, or the bass, or if you sang, you could sing too. So I kept pretty busy in high school, got good grades, had a great group of friends, and great years. I mean, the friends I had in high school, I still have to this day. Those are my best friends who I call every day, text every day. So I'm pretty blessed in that way. But high school was just normal. Well, for me, normal high school upbringing.
Oh yeah, I know. I heard one of your podcasts earlier this week. I know your first love in high school, or even before that, with your dad when he gave you the intro to softball.
Right.
How much did softball play in the person you became, and the trials and tribulations of being on a softball team in high school? What would that do for you?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said in my podcast, I'm sorry, guys.
No, you're good. You're good.
That was a phone call coming in. I'm sorry. Softball was a great sport for me that really played into how I've reacted to things and taken in information in certain ways because of softball. I think sports in general are very important for young people, because it just teaches us so many different values. For me, I wasn't the best softball player. I wish that I was. I mean, I felt like no matter how many practices I went to, how hard I tried, I just was never going to be a super incredible softball player. And that was just that. But I was proud of where I put myself in the sport. My dad had a very good way of reminding me that, we're not always going to get what we want in life. But if we keep working hard, eventually we could get there. And he was just a constant reminder to me, to keep working hard, to keep trying, to keep going for what you're trying to do in life. So for me, it was just all around a great teacher in life.
Perfect.
I love that. So a quick plug for your podcast. We've started, of course, listening to it. And so her podcast is called The Unarmed Podcast, and there's a reason behind it. But so in her first episode is where she shares, more of a story about her softball journey, her journey through high school, something that Charles hasn't mentioned yet. And it's a personal fave of mine is that she's from the Valley. I grew up in the Valley. So every summer summer. I was there with my family, the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. But, she shares her story about her trials and her things that she celebrated throughout high school. There was a big story that she shared about, her softball journey and just being benched a lot of the time. But you showed up, you went to practice, you went to the games, you cheered on your teammates. And I just really, really love that you showed grit, and you also showed just such a great you were just a great team player. That's awesome. I just loved it.
Yeah, I mean, my dad always taught me to be a good team player, because at the end of the day, softball is not just about one individual player, it's about the team as a whole. And I had a few teammates who were very individualized in the sport, and you could tell, you could see it. But I I mean, I wasn't like that one because I wasn't the best freaking softball player out there. Maybe if I had been good, maybe I would have had a little cockiness to me, but I was very humble in the sport because I wasn't very good at it. And, I kept cheering for the team because, I mean, at the end of the day, it is about what we do as a team and not what we do as individual players. It's all what we do as a whole. So I tried to keep my spirits high, even though I was benched a lot of the time. I just kept my spirits high, and I just told myself, keep going to practice, keep doing this, keep doing that. Maybe one day your freaking coach will put you in. So I just always had high hopes.
No, that's awesome. And I know your senior year, y'all made it all the way to the state championship or championship in general. It was one of your podcasts. And that moment where you said you didn't even get to play in that game, you sat in the dugout and just soaked it all in. And your coach at the time, or the assistant coach, Papa Bear, sat down next to you and literally apologized. That had to have been a defining moment for you.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember the team now. I don't know if I remembered it then, but it was Cal Allen. And Cal Allen, I think I'm saying it right. They just had one hell of a pitcher. I mean, she struck everybody out. She was a hell of a pitcher. And I mean, to me, I mean, it's my senior year. A lot of the girls didn't show up to that game because there was some type of formal going on. I still made the effort to go out there, and I just wasn't played not one freaking inning. I think, my coach even mentioned to me, like, we went into this game knowing we weren't going to win. But I mean, my head coach, my assistant coach told me that, but the head coach, he just had that win-win-win mentality, and he wasn't really thinking about all the players, but it's whatever. I mean, I'm one to think that everything in life happens for a reason, and that specific moment in life probably molded me in ways that have turned out for the better now.
Absolutely. So, talk about you've mentioned it before, like in your Instagram post, and is that you are a firm believer that everything in life happens for a reason, but everything that's happened, before a big life event has kind of prepared you for that moment. So I mentioned earlier, your podcast is called The Unarmed Podcast. So what was the reason, for those that do not know you, what was the reason for naming your podcast as such? And tell us a little bit kind of about that part of your life that was just a really big pivotal time, and who's kind of made you who you are today.
Yeah, so the podcast is named The Unarmed Podcast because I have one arm. I lost my right arm in a car accident in 2013. It was a tire blowout. It was just due to a tire blowout. A lot of people like to hate on me and speculate that this was drunk driving, this and that. No, we were just taking a trip down to the valley. Early in the morning, our tire blew out. I was the passenger. My boyfriend was the driver. And it wasn't just, a normal blowout. Typically, if you're driving behind someone, their tire blows off. They kind of just swerve to, not even swerve. They just kind of go off to the side and do what they got to do to fix it. And this just was not anything like that. It just sounded like a gunshot. And Daniel, my boyfriend, lost complete control of the vehicle. We ended up rolling, and I had to have my arm amputated because of it. There was no way that it was going to be saved after the trauma that it had gone through the accident. And so that was that. I mean, that's a big moment in my life. It didn't change who I was, but it was able to bring out some traits and I don't know. So different types of strengths, physically and mentally, that I never thought I would ever have in my life. It's been a point in my life that's been for the better. Anyone who ever asks me, if there was like some cool science where we could bring your arm back, would you take it back? And I've always said no, I wouldn't take my arm back. There are times in the days where I wish I did have my arm, because things can get really hard sometimes. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't take my arm back. It's made me into a really strong individual when it comes to the way that I think, to the way that I react to certain things that happen to me now. So it's been a great overall trauma that's happened to me, oddly enough. And so when I came up with the idea of doing a podcast and I was coming up with names, I probably had like 3 or 4. And then for some reason, I just thought of the Unarmed Podcast. I showed it to Daniel. I was like, what do you think? He's like, no, that's stupid. I was like, well, I like it. I was like, I think it's good. Like, I think there's like a pun in there, but it's also like unarmed, meaning like I'm going into the, I was like, I like it. And so it stuck, and everybody else liked the name of it. And that's why it's called the Unarmed Podcast. So other than me not having an arm, there's really, other than it had a good pun in it and it sounded good.
No, well, it's an amazing title. It pretty much, like you said, it has the pun, but it also, like you were saying, it means you're coming in there with your guard down, and you're just talking, you're having conversations.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. Now, going back to the accident, how long were you in the hospital?
I was only in there for 3 days. It would have been 2 had I not had a bit of a fever on the second night. So they kept me to watch that fever, make sure there was no infections going on. And then by the 3rd day, I was out of there.
Wow.
That's
yeah.
What were your
Pretty fast.
That was pretty fast. Like nowadays, like when you have a baby, I mean, you're like in and out almost the same day. You're like, hey, don't send me home with this little being that I don't know how to take care of yet. Tell us about just the days and the months, after you were hospitalized and you were in the accident. What did life look like at that point for you?
It wasn't normal. I can't say that it was normal. It was very stuffed, shall I say. I had, not that it was a bad thing, but I had, all my family from the Valley go up to San Antonio where the accident happened, where I was living and where I was in the hospital. They all went up. They were there to support me and be in the hospital. And when I got back to my apartment, Daniel, my boyfriend, stayed with me. My parents stayed with me. There was a point where Daniel's mom stayed with me, and it was just very cramped. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. It was stuffed, like I said. I was trying to figure out how life was going to be now, but I was very optimistic from the beginning. The moment I woke up from that surgery, I didn't want anybody to do anything for me.
Wow.
Because I knew right off the bat that if I started letting people do things for me, I was never going to learn on my own. Mm-hmm. And I was a very independent woman living in San Antonio on my own, had my own job, my own car. I paid my own bills. I was just very independent. And I love that about myself. It was the person I always wanted to be. And I didn't want to lose that sense of independence and pride that I had in myself. So in order to keep that, I had to learn how to do these things on my own, because I wasn't expecting my parents or Daniel to live with me for the rest of my life, nor did I want that.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm living with Daniel now. But
well, it's by choice. It's by choice. So that's
by choice. Yeah. But, my mom, she was a mom. She was just being a mom. And I'm sure I would have been the same way, had something like that, God forbid, happen to my son, Joaquin. But, she got to my apartment. She wanted to start cleaning. I was like, bro, let me clean. Let me do it. She wanted to make the sandwiches. I said, let me make my sandwich. Let me do my hair. Let me dress myself. Let me tie my shoes. And there were things that were very, very frustrating. Like, I don't ever remember going into tears out of frustration, but I would get very angry and upset out of frustration, thinking, that there's so much in life that I took for granted, because of how much I was struggling right then and there, like how to put my earrings on, like putting the backs on earrings,
Wow.
how to curl my hair, how to button my jeans, just how to do certain things that I took for granted before that day. And so there were times that were very, very trying. I will say that I lost a lot of confidence in myself, you know, because of the way I looked. But I had a good tribe around me. So even though it was very stuffed and cramped, I had a good tribe around me to uplift me, and to keep the positivity within me. So it was a very cramped few months, but obviously it was what I needed because it turned out great at the end of the day.
Wow. Do you feel that you were born with that just desire to just, be independent and strong, and or is that something that you feel that your parents taught you, through growing up? Like where did you get that from?
No, that's all me. And my mom always tells me that she doesn't know where the hell I got that from, because at a very young age, I told my mom that I did not want to live with them. I wanted to live on my own. I wanted to have a big girl job. My dream was to live in New York City on my
Wow.
own, work for a great social media company. Like I wanted to live the New York life, and that was instilled in me at a very young age. I don't know what the hell did it, but something triggered in my mind that that's who I wanted to be in life, and that's what I set out to do. Going to college, moving away, moving out at a young age. I was out at the age of 17, maybe. I was out at the age of 17. I never went back. I always
Wow.
stayed on my own after that. It's just who I wanted to be. It was this vision that I saw myself in, and something that Daniel always says. There's traits that me and Daniel always talk about. Like, I wish I was more like you in this way, or I wish I was more like you in that way. And one thing that Daniel always says, he's like, I wish I was more like you in the way that when you set your mind to something, it's gonna happen. He's like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like he's like, when I know your mind is set on something, I know you're gonna do it.
Wow.
And I never got to go to New York and live on my own, but I was able to go visit it and see it and experience it. So that was good enough for me. I still have moments like when Joaquin's screaming around the house, like, God damn it, I wish I was in New York, like, on my own, just doing my thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what instilled it in me. It wasn't my parents, I'll tell you that for sure. My parents, especially my mom, she's a very hovering mom. She bribed me. I wanted to go to Corpus Christi for college. And I don't even remember the name of the university there, but I wanted to go to Corpus Christi for college. I just wanted to be away. Like I wanted that. To me, a real college experience is like being away
Yeah.
from home and
Yeah.
like doing the dorm life. Like that's just me. I mean, that doesn't have to be everybody. I'm
Oh
not
no.
saying that's the real deal, but to me, that was a college life experience. And my mom bribed me. She's like, listen, because it's not Pan Am anymore, but back then it
Yeah.
was Pan Am in
Mhm.
Edinburgh. She bribed me. I was like, I'm going to Corpus. And she's like, listen, I'll buy you a laptop. I'll get like all the channels on cable if you stay. And I was like, well, I would really like a laptop and I'd really like cable. So I stayed. I stayed like the first 2 years I went to Pan Am. And then after that, I was like, bro, all right, I got my laptop. I got 2 years worth of channels. Like I'm out. I
You gotta
gotta
go.
do it. Like, I'd be really disappointed in myself had I not moved to San Antonio and got that experience that I was craving and desired so much. And I got it.
Wow.
You mentioned something that where you kind of you spoke on it, but it's the power of the made up mind. We've recently, I've become like a podcast junkie. We commute into town for work, and we can spend up to 3 or 4 hours a day in traffic. And I'm listening to a podcast it's through Brian Buffini. He's a real estate coach, and one of his guests was talking about the topic of the made up mind, the power of the made up mind. And, like you said, you're like, I don't know where it came from. You made up your mind that post accident, you were going to continue to be independent and take care of yourself and not depend on other people. And the power of the mind is such a strong tool. Recently, and I know that you're all about health, which is really, really cool. Something that Charles and I have done recently was we made up our mind that we wanted to be healthy. We're overweight. And we actually started our journey. Now we're 1 day post, Whole 30. So if you're not familiar with Whole 30 listeners, Whole 30, you give up sugar and you give up, legumes and no alcohol. And I love red wine, no bread. And I told him, I said, I was sitting at the kitchen table one day and I just started sobbing. And he's like, what is wrong with you? What is wrong? And I said, I think I'm borderline depressed. Like, I'm really sad. I'm really sad. I've gained weight. It's affecting every part of my life. So I finally just made up my mind that I was going to change my life. And I told him, I'm starting, Whole 30 on Monday, and you can either join me or not. It's what's the saying? It's shit or get off the pot. I was like, look, we're either going to do it or not. I'm going to do it by myself, and I'm okay with that. So we started it, and 30 days later, here we are. Combined, we've lost over 30 pounds together. We've lost like 10 inches. We started Body Pump, which is like, lifting weights. And
I call it the death trap in the morning.
And, so waking up at 5 a.m. is like no big deal now. But anyhow, to go back to, why I'm sharing that is what you touched on is you just made up your mind. And that's the exercising your brain, exercising your mind and your willpower. That's such a huge thing that is so much more important than exercising your muscles and because that just comes with it.
Oh yeah, 100%. I love what you talked about there, borderline depression. I know in the accident that might have set in with you. After this quick commercial break, let's touch on that.
Houston, have you considered creating your own podcast just like this episode? Let us help you record, produce, and distribute your ideas in your very own podcast. To learn how to get started, contact us at info@houstonpodcaststudio.com.
All right, and we're back. Like I said right before the break, Veronica was talking about borderline depression. Krystal, was that a factor for you, like, at all with the accident?
Nope.
No?
Surprisingly, no. There was one day, I might have mentioned it in my episode, I'm not sure or not, but there was one day where I was just overwhelmed, not with what was going on with me, but with the people staying with me. And at that time, it was me, Daniel, and his mom was there. Mm-hmm. And, at that time, I think I wanted nothing more than just to be alone and kind of process things, because the entire time I always had people with me. And so I was just fed up with people constantly being there. And I said, you know what? I just need to get the hell out of here and go have some time to myself. And I drove away. Daniel called my mom to tell her, and my phone was like nonstop ring. I had to turn it off because she was worried I was going to go do something to myself, but that wasn't the case. I went to a park. I sat down on a bench and I was like, I'm just going to cry it out. Like, I'm going to let out emotions for losing my arm, for what I went through. I'm going to let myself feel bad for myself for a second. And I legitimately sat there and tried to cry, and nothing came out. I don't know why that happened. It probably wasn't good that I held in so much, but at that time, it didn't bother me. To this day, it doesn't bother me. I think a year or two ago on my anniversary, I really sat down and tried to think about everything, because I've never really had a moment to myself to process things. I kind of just push everything down. I feel like I'm too blessed to let crap like that get to me. To me, crap is losing an arm. But, I sat there and I tried to cry. Nothing came out. I got up and I went shopping. Wow. Like, it didn't happen to me. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful it didn't happen to me, but a lot of it had to have been because I had people around me. I had a lot of people coming in, bringing in my spirits. I had a lot of positivity around me, but depression never came into play. To this day, it doesn't come into play. I deal a lot with anxiety. But even then, you know, during the first months of the accident, even probably the first year, I didn't deal with any of that.
How do you deal with your anxiety? Like, what do you do to just kind of move forward with life?
Well, what other question from there is what makes you anxious? What causes the anxiety?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always dealt with anxiety. It didn't get really bad until my pregnancy. But before, there are certain things that I'm very fearful of. I'm very fearful of the world ending. So anytime people would start mentioning like back in 2000, everybody said the world was going to end.
Oh
Y2K,
yeah.
Yeah, I just make myself sick to my stomach. Like I start throwing up, my heart starts pounding, I start sweating. So I'm very fearful of the world ending. It still gets me to this day. I'm very fearful of thunder and lightning storms. That one was instilled in me as a little girl. My kindergarten teacher told us the world was going to end because there was a thunderstorm going on, and my mom said,
Wow.
yeah, and my mom, and so there's two things right there of why I'm so fearful. My mom said that I was never the same after that day. Like thunderstorms, lightning storms, people mentioning the end of the world. Like I'm done. So there are certain, like flying on a plane, I get very anxious. There are just certain things that make me very anxious. And what I've noticed is that what makes me the most anxious are things that I cannot control. If I cannot control what's going on, that makes me anxious, is what I've come to realize. And when I got pregnant with Joaquin, it was a whole nother level of anxiety that I had never experienced before, and something that scared the hell out of me. Doctors couldn't figure it out. I spent thousands of dollars on a therapist who kept telling me, you're pregnant, you're scared, you're pregnant, you're scared. I was like, bro, you're out of your damn, why am I paying thousands of dollars? Like, I literally begged her to check me into a mental hospital because I felt like I was going mentally insane. Like something did not feel right in my head. And I've had people tell me different things. People say that they were like, boosts of testosterone or boosts of something. Like people have different ideas of what was going on with me. But I'll never know what it was, other than it was just a test from God. But it was so bad. I had multiple panic attacks every day for my pregnancy. I would just cry out of nowhere. Like it was insane. It was the worst experience ever. And it's why I don't ever want to get pregnant again. Not that I don't ever want to have kids, but me getting pregnant, it's an absolute no. Because if there's even the slightest chance of that happening to me again, I don't want it. I was in the worst mental state that I've ever been in my entire life. I don't know if maybe it was because I had pushed everything down and pushed it, and then this boost of hormones just triggered something, and then everything started coming up at once. Yeah. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was bad. I spent hundreds of dollars on meditation apps. Like I was very proactive about it though. Like I didn't let it get the best of me, even though it was getting the best of me. I was doing everything in my willpower to make it go away. I bought books on anxiety, like workbooks. I sat and I did workbooks. I Googled everything, like what will take away anxiety. And I did meditation. I did workbooks. I went to go see a freaking therapist that did nothing for me. I worked out when I could. You know, I did things that made me happy. And at the end of the day, I just realized that it was me having to accept that anxiety was never going to leave me. It was going to be with me for the rest of my life. It was just a matter of how I chose to react to it. And that's just kind of what changed things around for me. So I still have anxiety. It's never going to go away. I never try to make it go away either. I just have to choose how I react to things differently. A lot of what I do now, I stretch a lot, and when I stretch, I put on meditation music, kind of just take away. I do a lot of essential oils. I work out a lot. Working out kind of helps ease the mind and clear the mind. I eat better foods. Believe it or not, a lot of what you eat causes depression, causes anxiety, causes all these different triggers and inflammation and everything. So I'm still very proactive in trying to keep it down, but I never try to eliminate it as a whole, because that's just going to bring a whole nother world of problems for me. I just have to react to it differently and be proactive about the way that I do things to keep it down.
That's a lot. That's heavy. That's really heavy. Man, I couldn't imagine I couldn't imagine being there. That's just
And pregnancy itself is hard enough. I mean, I've had
Right.
one. I have one right now, an 8-year-old, and then I have my bonus baby coming. Charles has an almost 3-year-old, and
3 going on 5.
ooh, no, 3 going
Yeah.
on like 15. I mean, he's a borderline teenager. But being pregnant is tough enough already for a woman, because I feel like part of my identity changed, and it for the better, but going through that journey was really, really tough. Your body is changing, your hormones are just everywhere. Tell us about just a little bit more about kind of your journey. And you told us about your pregnancy, but what about motherhood? Like, how
Yeah.
has that kind of changed how you mother your son Joaquin, or how has what is life looking like now?
Shit. Sometimes I wish I was pregnant again with Joaquin, just because I just go back inside where you're not walking, you're not talking. It's hard. I mean, it's very, very hard. It's the most trying experience for me. Like I thought I've been tested before, but I am being tested now. Parenting is a difficult thing. I feel like, just like pregnancy, people always tend to talk about the unicorns and rainbows of pregnancy and parenting and stuff like that. But there's also very dark sides to it. And something that I've noticed is that I'm a very angry person, for reasons, I don't know. Again, maybe it's because I pushed everything down, but parenting can bring out the good in me, and it can also bring out the bad. Like I always find myself yelling at Joaquin at times. Like, I'm very frustrated. Maybe it's because I'm doing it by myself. Daniel's always working. I have no family here. But then there are the moments of joy and happiness. It's a weird thing. There's good, there's bad.
Yeah.
It's just a very trying time. But I will say that in regards to doing parenting with one arm, to me, it's nothing out of the norm, because it's just what I've been doing for the last 6 years now. Like, I have to figure it out eventually. I'm not going to grow my arm back. So, I mean, I got to work my way around things. And that's how I did parenting from the beginning. I had to figure out how to carry him. I had to figure out how to change his diaper, figure out how I was going to feed him, get the stroller in and out of the truck, get the car seat in and out. Like, it was just a learning process for me. It still is a learning process for me. Because new things pop up every day, as you guys know, as parents.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
And having a kid is difficult. I'll say for me, my kid is delayed in his speech. He goes to speech therapy. He goes to occupational therapy. Like, he talks, but he doesn't talk at the level where everyone's saying he should be talking.
No.
And it's hard for you to take your kid somewhere and then to say, like, oh, he failed the test, or he's below average. Like, it just brings on a whole new level of stressors.
Wow.
Added on top of being an adult, added on top of being an amputee, added on top of trying to make a living for yourself. Like, it's just a lot, man. It's a lot to deal with. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I don't know what the hell I'd do without that kid, even though some days I just want to put him outside with like a for free sign. But I don't know what I'd do without him.
I don't think I saw. I was able to see, but how old is Joaquin?
He's gonna be 3 on December 3rd. So, like, I don't know what the hell people mean when they say terrible 2s, because I felt like 2s he was fine, and like he's getting closer to 3, and I don't know what to do. Like,
Oh, I am right there with you. Henry's
Yeah.
my 2-year-old. From like 1.5 to 2.5, it was easy sailing. Now that
right.
he's 2.5 going on 3, he'll be 3 in January on the 31st. It has become a struggle where he is trying to be so independent, where he's trying to, Daddy, I help, Daddy, I help, Daddy, I do. And if I don't let him do it, he's like throwing a fit. I'm like, hold on, homie, slow down. Yeah,
Right.
no, so it's
Tantrums.
I completely am right there with you, and I know Veronica is too.
Sometimes we have to remind ourselves, like, we're the adult, they're the child.
Right. No,
Yeah.
yeah. And that I think that's my problem, is that I know my authority and I know his authority, and I just don't take any crap. Like, I'm the parent. I live in South Florida, where it's nothing but white people. I'm not racist, but it's nothing but white people.
Well, the valley
And
is all brown, so
yeah, and so when I go out in public, and if Joaquin is acting like a damn fool, like, I will smack his hand, or I will straight up tell him, like, you need to be quiet. You need to start acting right. And people just stare at me like a lot of people have told me, like, you're pretty hard on him. And I'm like, you should have seen the way I was treated.
Exactly. You should have seen the way my mom treated me.
Yeah, I'm just the parent that I take no crap. Like, you're two, I get it, but no, it's not gonna work.
No, that's awesome. Let's take another quick break here, and then let's come back and hit the whole CrossFit thing that you're doing, because you're killing it over there.
Houston, have you considered creating your own podcast just like this episode? Let us help you record, produce, and distribute your ideas in your very own podcast. To learn how to get started, contact us at info@houstonpodcaststudio.com.
Coming back, guys. So yeah, I see your stories, I see your workouts, and I'm like, bro, she has one arm and she's working out harder and doing crazier things than I would ever do. How is it doing CrossFit and being a fit mom and doing everything that you're doing with being an amputee as well?
Well, I will say CrossFit was a big savior for me after the accident. I had just started doing CrossFit right before I lost my arm. And CrossFit is what gave me my confidence back. CrossFit is what showed me how strong of a person I truly was, physically and mentally. CrossFit was just a big game changer for me. I don't know what I'd do without that sport, without that community. For me, after the accident, that's what got my life back into where I wanted it to be. For me to be able to go into the box, a box is a gym, in our words, but for me to go into the box and be able to complete these workouts, at the beginning, I wasn't lifting weights the way I do now. I was kind of testing the waters and learning how to do things. But once I started getting back into it, I was a better athlete than I ever was with two arms. I was lifting numbers way heavier than I ever lifted with two arms. Like, I was just always surpassing my goals. And it just goes to show that your mentality will always beat your physical abilities. Like, if it's right up here, then it's going to happen everywhere else. And that just showed. I mean, the Olympic lifts that I was hitting and the numbers that I was getting, I could knock people with two arms out of the freaking water. Like, it was insane. And it helped me. Like, that just gave me more confidence and more confidence and more confidence. And because of CrossFit, I have a lot of what I have today. I have an unbelievable sponsor when it comes to supplements. I'm with First Form. I won their athlete search probably about a year after my amputation. I'm still with them to this day. Wow. Like, I had so much come to me because of who I proved myself to be in CrossFit. At the same time, I let my identity go with CrossFit at one point in my life. Like, to me, I thought all I was CrossFit, and nobody wanted anything to do with me other than CrossFit. So it's been good. There was a point where I just let it get the best of me. I didn't know that I could be anyone else other than a CrossFit athlete. So I kind of had to work on myself on that aspect of things, but I'm in a really good mental state with working out and being healthy now. And it was because of Joaquin. Even when I was pregnant, I put a lot of pressure on myself. Like, I have to be that pregnant mom who works out all the time. Like, that's just what people are expecting of me. And that wasn't the reality of things. The reality was that I was suffering on the inside and I was begging for an out. And so I couldn't do that for what I thought people were expecting of me. And that killed me on the inside. Like, I thought, now I'm nobody because I left my identity with CrossFit. And after I had Joaquin, I was still trying. I was terca. I was like, I gotta lift the big numbers. I gotta lift the big weights. Like, I gotta do it. And I was just hurting myself constantly, always getting injured. I couldn't pick Joaquin up out of the crib. And I had to reevaluate what I was doing, rethink how I was doing things. And I said, bro, listen, is it about the 135-pound clean, or is it about being able to do just about anything with your son when he's older? And I wanted to be a good mother for Joaquin. I didn't want to always be injured. I didn't always want to be sick. So I changed the way I did things. I didn't always have to this day, I don't always have to have a barbell in my hands. Like, I can easily use a dumbbell or a kettlebell and get a great workout. Like, to me, I was always showing off back then. And I don't care to show off anymore. I just want to be healthy. I want to be fit. And I want to feel good about myself, and I want to feel confident. And I just had to change the way I do things. So I still do CrossFit. I still work out, but I no longer feel the need to show off anymore. So it's been a good mixture of things for me, CrossFit as a whole.
That's awesome. It sounds like it's come full circle for you, where it was just like, go at it 100%, be the best, be the number one, be this. And you're like, man, hold on. I have a kid. I can be number one, but I don't have to hurt myself getting there. And that's freaking awesome. So are there ever times when you're in the gym and you're getting looks like, man, she's kicking my ass in the gym and she only has one arm, especially from the guys? Do you ever feel anything from the guys or in there, or does that push you even harder to work out even harder?
Well, I mean, CrossFit's a lot different than your typical Gold's Gym or LA Fitness. I like CrossFit because it's different in that way. You have a group of people from all walks of life, whether you're an amputee, whether you're overweight, whether something else is going on, you're a veteran, this and that, you're a full-time mom. Like, there's just people from all walks of life. And I've always felt that when you walk into a box, you're not there to judge anyone but yourself.
Perfect.
I'm a very competitive individual. So I always walk in with a very different mindset. I'm like, I'm going to be you. You're all going down. But that's because of the way that I was I was competitive before as an athlete, and it's just kind of stuck with me. Like, I'm still competitive in anything I do. Like, if Daniel wants to do something, I got to do it better. And it doesn't even have to be CrossFit wise. Like, I'm just a very competitive individual. So I had to work on that too. But I've also always felt like the people that I go to the box with, they're like that the first few days if they don't know me. After that, it's just whatever. I'm just a normal person with them doing a workout, and I just so happen to do it with one arm. That's a big reason why I don't like going to the other gyms anymore, because I feel like there's not that sense of community. Everybody's there doing their own thing, having their, just doing their own thing. I feel like there's a lot of judgment there. That just may be me and the way that I feel, but in CrossFit, that's why I kept going back, because of the community of people, the no judgment that I felt there. It's different. So to me, I wouldn't say that I walk in somewhere and I get judged immediately. Like, it's whatever. And I mean, amputees in CrossFit now, back then, maybe not when I started, it was rare, but now it's normal. Like,
that is
cool.
so
We got
cool.
another
That's
amputee
awesome.
coming in. Yeah, like, amputees doing CrossFit is just normal now, which is awesome.
So I know in the intro I said you're a Paralympic, and you said no. Let me touch on that later. Let's touch on that. Yeah.
So my good friend Natalie Boulay is a Paralympian. She went to Rio, did the thing and all that. She introduced me to the Paralympics. She said, we need throwers, whether it be shot put, javelin, the disc. She said that they were in need of throwers. And I was like, I don't know anything about any of that. And she's like, let me introduce you to my coach. I've shown him your videos. He says that you've got great potential. Like, let's just at least meet. So I went to her house. Her coach was there, and he had me doing the drills that she throws discus. So he had me doing like the discus drills just to see if I had anything in me that he saw. And he's like, I want you he's like, but I need to find out what I want you for first. And so I guess he went and asked the Paralympic team like what they were in need of the most, and what they needed the most at that time were javelin throwers. And I was like, I don't even know what a javelin is, to be honest with you. He's like, all right. He's like, you know, he showed me the thing. He sent me some videos. And it was just one of those things, like I set my mind to it. I was like, all right, I'm going to make Team USA. I'm going to go compete. I'm going to do well. And that was one of the most humbling sports that I've ever done. Like, I'll take CrossFit over doing javelin any day. Like, it was so humbling. Like, I'd be lying if I didn't walk into that university thinking I was a badass. Like, all right, what is it? You know, I do CrossFit. I got it. And then you give me this freaking pointy stick and ask me to throw it, you know, 20 meters. I should be throwing 20, 30 meters. That's what they want. And I can barely make it like 2-3 meters. Like, it was such a humbling sport. It's a lot of technical stuff, like from the footwork, the arm work, the shoulder work. Like, it was just so much that I had never been exposed to before. And I was at it every day. I would drive an hour 2 to 3 times a week to go see this coach at a university and practice with him. Like, I was head in it, man. Like, I was all for it. I was ready. And a week before I was supposed to fly to Arizona to make the team, you know, to throw. If I hit a certain number, I was going to make team. I was ready. I was prepared. And I was doing drills one day at the box before I was coaching back then, CrossFit. So before my class came up, I was doing some drills, like some footwork I had to practice on. And my ankle didn't turn. I don't know. Yeah, whatever.
Twisted or something like that.
Yeah, it twisted. Yeah, so my ankle twisted and it hurt like hell. And I was like, shit. Like, it hurt so bad. And I called my boyfriend because he worked right down the street. And I was like, I think I broke my foot. Like, come get me. And we went to urgent care and they're like, yeah, you've got a fracture.
Oh, man.
So they recommended I go see a surgeon. And so I go to the surgeon. And I was like, please tell me that I can throw next week. Like, I'll be able to throw, right? And he's like, dude, no. Like, this is the worst fracture I've ever seen. It was called a Jones fracture. So it's actually like the fracture kind of teed. So it was like a line, and it was the worst fracture you could ever have. And he's like, you need surgery. I need to go in there. I need to put a plate. I need to put screws. And it got the best of me. I went through the surgery. I got through the surgery. I healed. I was still working out after the surgery. Like, I worked around my boot that I was in and all that. But I never went back to throwing a javelin again. Different factors. Natalie being in the Paralympics, knew a lot of people in the Paralympics, and I was hearing word that they already didn't like me. They're like, we don't want this hotshot CrossFitter that thinks she's all that coming in. Like, it was just a bit of talking smack. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
I didn't like that one bit. I was like, these people don't even know me. Like, here I am trying my best to try to make the team, be a part of Team USA. So one, I didn't like that. 2, it was the most humbling sport ever. And I didn't think that I was ready to be that as much into it as you need to be. And I wasn't ready for that again. People always ask me if I ever go back to it. Probably not, especially with Joaquin. Like, it takes way too much time, way too much practice. Like, people that go to the Olympics, they don't fucking have kids. Like, these people are like, these people are practicing day in, day out. They got no one but themselves. And I don't have that anymore. And to tell you the truth, I don't have that mindset for it anymore. Like, it's not in my head. Like, I need to go. Like, where are they going this year? Tokyo or next year? Somewhere over there. That's where the 2020 Olympics are going to be. Like, I don't have that in my head. I'm not like Tokyo. I need Tokyo. I got different things in my mind now. So I was never a Paralympian. If anything, back then I was a Paralympic hopeful, is what they call it.
I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. So, a quick question for you. Did you ever hit the 20 meters?
I got to 18. I got to 18 in practice one day. I got to 18, and Scott, who was my coach, was like, there it is. Like, you know, we got to tweak some certain things in your shoulder and how you throw, tweak the footwork a little bit. He's like, and we'll get there. So I was right at 18, a week before I was set to go
Wow.
throw to qualify. So I was right at 18. I don't know what I'd ever get again. To be honest, I don't care.
That shows some grit and determination there. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
18 meters is hard for me. It's a rough thing to do. Like I watch people now because it intrigues me now. So I watch the Olympics, I watch the Paralympics, I watch them throw javelin, and I'm just like, shit, man. Like I know the work you got to do to be able to throw what you just threw, and that's like I have so much more respect for people who throw javelin now.
You know, I respect athletes. I mean, being able to just, just getting up every day, like you said, it's the foods that we eat. It's not just going to the gym or going to the box. It's a lifestyle. It's a mindset. I really, really respect athletes, especially athletes that have endured, trials just like you. I mean, life has changed. We talked about podcasts earlier, naming them. We intentionally, of course, named our podcast Legacy Reborn. And our logo is a phoenix. And for those that don't know the story of the phoenix, or just kind of what it symbolizes, it's a bird that arose from ashes. And, when I think about kind of my birthday, I feel like I've had multiple birth dates throughout my lifetime, things that I've experienced. Most recently, of course, my divorce a few years back, losing my dad when I was 17. He had a really short battle with cancer, and, stuff like that. It's tough. And I feel like every time I've gone through life events, and it's not over, life happens every day, and things will happen in the blink of an eye. But I feel like each time I go through something, I feel like I'm reborn. I'm experiencing life with this new lens. I'm looking through a different lens now, through kind of a different filter, and I'm wiser, and I just grow each time. What is a word of encouragement, a word of hope, something that you would like to share with our listeners, our followers, and just sharing that message of hope? And everyone's going through something, and you obviously went through something pretty big, pretty traumatic in life. What would you share with someone that's just going through that season of just trial right now, to uplift them and to just motivate them to keep going?
It's easy for someone to tell someone who's going through a hard time right now, like, just stay positive, just focus on the good, but that's not very helpful. At least to me, that's not how I see things. And when people come to me asking for advice, how do I lose weight? I'm depressed because I'm overweight. How'd you get through the amputation? I'm going through this, going through that. And at the end of the day, I always tell people or I ask them, how badly do you not want to be depressed anymore? How badly do you not want to be overweight? How badly do you want to be happy?